Want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for all of the continued support. Hey everybody, I'm going to be going over the top 10 best books that I read that were published in 2023. I've certainly read a lot more books that were published in 2023 than 10, so there is some exclusivity to this list. And let's just get right into it. I'm going to try to fire through these. I'm going to try to make this video like 10 minutes or less. We'll see how well I do. Number 10 is Dragonfired. This is book number 3 of the Dark Prophet Saga trilogy by J. Zachary Pike. This was released on September 1st. The first book was 𝐭 which I think most people think of the series as, and it won the 𝗣𝘅𝗶𝗄 contest in 2018. That's the self-published fantasy blog off that Mark Lawrence runs every year, which is awesome. It was one of the first books to win, maybe the first, back when it started. I think it was the first. But anyways, this thing's great. And I ended up giving it 4 stars, and I liked it a lot. It was everything that I wanted out of this story. It didn't hit quite the heights of the first book. I didn't expect it to. The second book, I had some criticisms with the story. The third one as well. Definitely took a long time to get going, but once it did, it really held my attention. This series is hilarious. It's the funniest fantasy books post Terry Pratchett that I've read. In fact, I think the first one, 𝐭 is funnier than most Pratchett books. Not all of them, but most of them. But yeah, great little story of a Dungeons and Dragons type of world with these characters that feel like they're just ripped out of an Dungeons and Dragons. Very funny and a very fun sort of satire on the financial industry in the world. Number 9 is Forge of the High Mage. This is book number 4 of Path to Ascendancy by Ian C. Esselmont. This was released on April 6th. This is part of the greater Malazan world. Ian C. Esselmont writes a couple series now. This is the second series that he's written in this world. This one's more of a prequel story to the Malazan Empire and how they came to be. I found this one to be my least favorite of the books in this series, but that did not mean it bad. That means that I really do love this series. This is the worst one. I still really liked it. The story did that thing the Malazan does where it goes in wild directions that I'm never going to expect that it goes. Definitely can never figure out what's going to happen because it just always slaps me from left field. But yeah, fun story. I really like Ian Esselmont as a writer. I think more people need to read his stuff. If you're a Malazan fan, what are you doing if you haven't read Ian C. Esselmont? He's not Steven Erikson. Only Steven Erikson is Steven Erikson. Because he's unique. He's his own person. And he does his own thing. And they're really well done. Number 8 is Fire and Song. This is book number 2 of Warformed Stormweaver by Bryce O'Connor. This was released on October 31st. The first book in this was The Iron Prince, which was released in 2020. I think it was released in 2020. And yeah, this is a lit RPG. I think it's a lit RPG, but it's a lit RPG progression fantasy story where it's got to be lit RPG, right? Like the most of the lit RPG as you can be, because this character is in this school setting. It's definitely more YA. And he is in like a battle mech armor that can be upgraded over time and get these stat upgrades on it. It's just fight after fight after fight with the plot in the background, which isn't amazing, but the fighting's great. And you get addicted to the progression and the finding out what's going to happen and how strong this character can get and surprise the world. It's definitely a zero to hero kind of story that just kind of scratches all the right itches. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next one. Number 7 is Gods of the Weirdwood. This is book number 1 of the Forsaken trilogy by R.J. Barker. This was released on June 27th. R.J. Barker is the author of the Tidechild trilogy and the Wounded Kingdom trilogy. Now, I am a big R.J. Barker fan. I think that the Tidechild is one of the best trilogies ever written. So when I heard about this one, I was very excited. Now, this book is very different than what I'm used to from R.J. Barker. This one gets very strange. It's got this very, what am I looking for here? Like old magic and stuck in the woods and just this creepy kind of vibe to it without being scary. And you don't know where things are going to go. The writing is just perfection. These characters are great. Keeps you on the edge of your seat. And yeah, I don't know if this book really took off like the Tide Child trilogy did, even though that series never really like exploded, but it certainly got some good attention from the fantasy community. I hope this one does too, even though I could see it not appealing to everybody because of how kind of odd it is in the setting, and kind of darker in tone it is. But yeah, very fun to me. Number 6 is Trust of the Emerald Sea. This is a standalone book, which was the first secret project by Brandon Sanderson. This was released on January 10th. I think that's when it became in wider circulation. I feel like everybody's talking about this. You probably read this before. But yeah, nice little fairy tale-like story about this young woman who goes on an adventure to find her, is it husband or fiance or boyfriend, but her significant other, and rescue him. It's very enjoyable, just puts a smile on your face. So much love and passion went into the story. I thought the magic was very fun and realized, which is crazy to me that Sanderson can keep bumping these things out with unique magic systems over and over and over and over again, and they don't seem to be getting worse. And you'd think he just run out of ideas. He doesn't. Most people think this is the best secret project. To me, it's not, because number 5 is for me, and it is The Sunlit Man. This is a standalone again. It's just the 4th and final secret project book by Brandon Sanderson, released on October 19th. This follows a character that, if you're familiar with Stormlight Archive, the point of view here is a character from that. I will not tell you who, because I don't want to ruin it, because it's not obvious right away who it is. You figured it out. You figure it out as you go along in the story. But this is just great because not only did I like the story, not only did I like the point of view of this character who I already love, but the frantic pace of the story. It starts off just going fast, and it doesn't really let up the gas until the final page. I'm not used to that in a fantasy story. I'm certainly not used to it from Brandon Sanderson. I loved it. I hope he doesn't keep doing it, because it was a nice little one-off to get that show that he can do it. And now that he's done, I wanted to go back to that kind of slower pace that he does. But yeah, this is super, super fun, and I really couldn't put it down. Number 4 is The 11th Cycle. This is book number 1 of the Mistland series by Kian N. Ardalon. This was released on February 1st. Very few people have read this thing or even heard about it. I don't even know where. People recommended it to me on Goodreads, and the way they talked about it made me feel like I need to pick it up. And it's got this very Dark Souls-inspired world, very dark, very grim. Epic fantasy story from a multi-POV perspective in this kind of classic, old fantasy setting that you would read out of older books. Starts off kind of slow, and you're like, where is this thing going, and why do people like this? And then finally, S hits the fan. Everything kind of goes wild. The violence and grim moments are kind of unparalleled in any book that I've read. And that can turn off a lot of people. There's some very dark things that happen here that are very disturbing. I like that kind of thing because I don't get to read it very often, and it always surprises me. This one very much did. And yeah, great stuff. And this book deserves more attention. I think it got my number 1 earlier when I said the most underrated fantasy stories that I read this year. And that has to be it, because it's so criminally underrated. Number 3 is The Captain. This is book 1 of The Last Horizon by Will White. This was released on April 4th. Will White is the author of Cradle. He finished up Cradle and then started this series. Although I think I got that wrong. I think it came out, the first book on this, before the last book of Cradle. I could be wrong. I think I'm right. But yeah, very, very different than what Cradle is. Now, I happen to like The Captain more than I liked any Cradle book, and I love Cradle. Cradle's one of my favorite series, and that tells you how much I love The Captain. The Captain, very much like The Sunlit Man, is a action-first book. It does not have the setup that you would expect out of a Will White book. It doesn't have the setup that you would expect out of a book where you're bringing a team together, bringing the super team back together to try to overcome a great evil in the world. But it doesn't. From the first page, it's going hot, and it doesn't let up. I love that kind of thing. I love the bravery of it. I thought the magic here was great. It's just so fun. This might be the most fun book that I read this year, and fun is what I'm looking for in a great story. Number 2 is The Tyranny of Faith. This is book number 2 of The Empire of the Wolf by Richard Swan. This was released on February 14th. The first book was The Justice of Kings, which came out in 2022. And this is better than Justice of Kings in nearly every way. Now, Justice of Kings is the story of this traveling, like, judge in an old fantasy setting. He goes from town to town to hear what disputes they might have, or mysteries that have to be unsolved that he can uncover using some, magic that he has that can make people tell him the truth. Very isolated story about really one location and solving the mystery there. This one was promised to do bigger things and deal with the world at large, which it did. It kept that darker vibe to it with still this mystery going along. Wonderful, wonderful writing, and just had me hooked from the beginning. And the number one book is the last book that I read this year, and it is The Will of the Many. This is book number 1 of the Hierarchy series by James Islington. This was released on May 23rd. I love this thing. The last video I made before this was my review of The Will of the Many. Check that one out if you want more details. But yeah, this is an old kind of Roman setting and a fantasy story. A lot of intrigue, a lot of political intrigue, a lot of trying to figure out who this character is and why they matter and what's going to happen. How this character is going to solve this problem with multiple people pulling at him and trying to, make it through the world without getting murdered from multiple different factions, using his wit and strength and intellect and to try to, keep his head above water. It's really fun, really addicting, and I demand that you read it. So those are my 10. Let me know what your 10 were, or just your top ones from the year that maybe didn't show up on this list. Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to talk to you about it, or come over to my Discord and we can talk about it more on a one-on-one kind of basis. A link is down below in the description as well. So thank you so much for watching this, and as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, Gregory, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, 𝗟𝗏𝗀, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tay C, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Fanixan, Harry B, Joe, Cat Mick, Michael Sugarman, Philippe, Sky, TW57, Wacky, and Zion. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.